Now, high noon has come and gone as the legislature gets to do its paper airplane thing. At this time of the year, what happens is all the bills that the House and the Senate are finished fooling around with, they fold into little airplanes and they throw it across the big square building to the other side of the legislative body. And that's kind of true. And Gene Ward has seen this crossover take place lots and lots of times, and we're very pleased that Gene's able to join us. As you know, in past times as majority leader, he has been our guest. This year's majority leader is also our guest, usually on Monday, and that has been the true case with Aaron for a while. And we're so pleased, Gene, to have you back. Nice to see you. I want to call you, while Aaron Johanson is the speaker, the minority leader, you are the Pope Emeritus of the Hawaii State Legislature.
You've heard it first. Minority Leader Emeritus, I think they take it out of academia, meaning, hey, you've been there, but you're
been there, done that.
Still active, but you get an honorific. As
you know what? I think it's interesting. You know, we have Dennis Rodman going to North Korea and becoming the American representative.
I heard your interview.
I mean, are you kidding? This guy's unbelievable. But I mean, I always think, you know, you bring your best. One thing that I particularly love is the way corporate America has embraced taking people of experience and giving them additional work. You know, whether you go to a big box store and somebody comes up to your door and says, you know, welcome to so-and-so, can I show you around? Your experience at the House of Representatives is so wonderful. It must be very difficult to keep a straight face every year when this crossover happens. And here it comes.
The cat and mouse game that the House and the Senate are playing is now coming to pass. Today we're going to meet all day to basically decide what we're going to say on the floor tomorrow and how we're going to vote.
By the way, the legislature is caucusing today. Everybody's out
doing their
It's
huddle.
not open for business.
It's day 36, and we've got just 60 days. So tomorrow is the big floor debate. In fact, if anybody wants to hear how their representative votes or how he speaks or how she speaks or what things that they may or may not say, tune in because we are on Olelo. And Olelo is live broadcast. As long as the gavel is open, people can hear and see. It's the only time we get a C-SPAN version of some of the things that are going on in the House. So it's a good peek into what's going on in the legislature.
Okay, now, I do know because, like I said, you've done this a bunch of times, Gene, and here's an important one. And I think that now, and it's partly due to technology and partly due to just the fact that the constituency demanded it, it's a lot easier, isn't it, for people to voice their thoughts to you and to your peers and to their representative officials than it ever was before. How important is that,
Mike? It's almost too easy to the point where because people have not. There's been an upkick, but not really a huge one. Just the way that
That's
it's so
sad.
easy to vote nowadays, but people are not voting. I think in the democratic evolution, if there is such a thing in America, there's a more. I want to have the veto power rather than I want to be engaged and looking over your shoulder and maybe micromanaging or giving you the feedback. Even though vested interest and interest groups, lobbyists, watch every move, every word that we say. But in general, the public kind of says, well, when they really do something bad, I'm going to get upset and I'm mad as hell and I'm going to change things. But right now, there's still a passive thing outside of those who are kind of on the inside baseball version.
Okay, you know, there's a lot of people who say, well, I signed the petition. You know, they know my thoughts. I signed the petition. Let's talk about the value of a petition, the value of a cut and paste, the value of a forward this, or you send me your name and $5 and I will get your representative's attention, as opposed to somebody that sits down and scribbles something down in their own handwriting or sends you an email or makes a phone call or sends a fax from their heart rather than from the ease of signing something else.
Mike, the best is like you and I are doing, eyeball to eyeball. That is the best. The verbal thing over the telephone is probably the next best. Sending an emissary, maybe the next. And then when you get emails, phone calls, faxes, actually all of those count, but it's when it reaches a certain number do the representatives start saying, hey, something's really cooking here. Like PLDC, everybody and their uncle were using everything, telex and Morse code. Smoke signals were coming into the Capitol. Get rid of the PLDC, which, by the way, footnote, there's a PLDC son alive in terms of PLDC Harbors.
Yeah, we're going to ask about that.
PLDC
It's really
DOE.
important.
There's two of those guys still alive.
And there's another thing, And hopefully we can learn that. Obviously, if you've got a particular situation you'd like to join in about, you may do that. No email. I'm getting email already, but no email during these sessions. It's live only, and Gene Ward is in the studio. So if you'd like to talk story with him about what the minority's position is on something or on a specific bill, you may do so at 296-KHNR. That's 296-5467. It's a pretty easy thing to do. I want to make sure that people understand one thing. This crossover time, which is, I believe, Thursday this week, after that, as a matter of fact, right now, there's no new legislation. I mean, whatever's out there to be discussed is to be discussed. There's no new bills, but I'm very worried about something.
This
is my question. This is my question because every year we've talked about this. I am very worried about the secrecy in which some of these bills seem to go off into some committee, and all of a sudden what we thought was to do with painting the boat ramp at the harbor is now leasing out the land under the harbor. It's called gut and replace.
Gut and replace is still alive and well. But, Mike, our caucus tried to get that in the rules. We tried to say in the rules, if you don't have the bill, if the bill is substantially altered at a certain time of the legislative process, it is not legal to be done so.
Yeah, but the word substantial. The word substantial is due to interpretation.
A boat versus a steamship, or something where it really gets blown out of proportion. So there are ways we could curtail that, but because of the gut and replace, GT tax is off the table right now, but it could come back on. Same-sex marriage is off the table. All of the gambling casinos in Waikiki are off the table, but they could come back.
Let me ask you this one thing before we go to our first break. I had the opportunity last week to talk to Rep. Cynthia Thielen about her pet project. It's for a long time.
Did she say hemp?
Yeah, a long time. She's been really, really, really working her, sometimes to no avail, to point this out. It looks like it's closer now to ever. And you and Cynthia, of course, go back, we
were freshmen together in
for a long
1991.
Doesn't it show you tenacity and stick-to-itness? If you get your facts and figures right, if you keep bringing something up that looks like it should happen, eventually it will.
Mike, that's a very good point because it applies not only to us in the legislature, but to those that you were communicating about how do you get the ear of your rep by fax, phone, telephone. If they are tenacious, legislation will come to pass, and it's been shown in so many different groups going slowly mad. I think the same-sex marriage guys, everybody who's tenacious and will do incremental but always keep focused on what their objective is. That's how actually politics change.
Yeah, because I know I did notice one thing, and once again, just before we go to the break, because this is sort of a piggyback question, it looks like the GMO people made their point.
Case in point.
Yeah, and it looks good, but it's not likely to happen, at least not yet.
I think the headline was won the battle but may have lost the war, likely lose the war. It's a real controversial one, and one of the frustrations of being a legislator is we have a lack of data, a lack of experience-based evidence. When we pass bills, too much of it's on the come, on the anecdote, on the so-and-so said something. We don't have the hard data, which we should do to avoid unintended consequences, which come up all the time. And the GMO bill is one of those.
Well, isn't the PLDC and the school lands thing the same thing? It looks good on paper, but when you start getting down to the nitty-gritty, maybe some of it's not so good.
Same as early learning also.
Gene Ward's in the house. You can be too. The number is 296-KHNR. Malin Moore is out there. We're going to check traffic, find out what's going on. It is crossover week. As a matter of fact, you won't be able to reach many of your legislators today because they're all off worrying about what's happening with these bills as they go zing to the other side of the house as of Thursday. We got more coming up.
You're listening to my good friend Mike Buck on The Mike Buck Show. Don't forget to join me, Michael Medved, live each and every morning at 10 on AM 690 KHNR.
Let me tell you how it will be.
Yep. 1 for you, 19 for me. I've explained that before. That's in the old English system of 20 shillings to the pound. 1 for you, 19 for me. When the government was taking 95% of your wages for taxes in Great Britain. And that's the medical system we want to install. So anyway, I play that in honor usually of David Ramirez, who will be here tomorrow morning, Taxman Tuesday, from Tax Relief Services. Today we have a taxman in another sense of the word, Gene Ward. Representative Gene Ward talking story today about pretty much taxes, because when it boils down, your government operates on what fees and taxes it can take from you, the taxpayer. And Gene Ward, not only am I a constituent, but a pretty much of a bird dog on this. I guess and we all go, Gene, some days they're going to write a nice story about you saying, you know what, he treated your dime as if it was his dime. And isn't that sort of an admirable legacy? And there are others too. I mean, you just don't like spending people's money. Unless you can show me.
That's a kind remark, but it's the reality is the working families of Hawaii are really having a problem. As I mentioned,
we're maxed out
many times.
Yeah.
57% of Hawaii's families can't send their kids to school with lunch money without a federal subsidy.
Yeah, 57.
That's
over
bad model for a place that's, quote, the desire of the world.
Yeah, aren't we in the era of entitlement? I mean, aren't a lot of these people just going to find out, hey, I need to go to a counselor, not to find out how I can better myself, but I can find out how I can get into these programs that are out there.
Mike, unfortunately, that's a national malaise, a national theme, if you will, for people to somehow shortcut hard work and application of their life and their commitment to a career, to where I can do this and I can get a free ride. Unfortunately,
isn't this dangerous?
It's dangerous, and even with a sequestration, all of those entitlement programs have not been examined. I'm not saying cut them, but they got to be examined for the reality. The demographics have got to fit the need. And right now, we got more people on an entitlement than are actually working.
Now, I must tell you that I was encouraged. And, we need to be optimistic. And one thing we've learned from each other over the years, we're both kind of optimistic, I was optimistic.
We wouldn't be in the business we're in.
Exactly. And I was optimistically looking at some of the steps the governor is taking to deal with sequestration. Some of the stuff that was in the paper over the weekend. Now, this is a governor that was in charge of the campaign for Obama in Hawaii. And the sequestration being Obama's idea, which he seems to have totally forgotten. At least at the state level, it looks like we're looking at ways of dealing with this. It's a necessity rather than a political move. Isn't this necessary that we have to do this right now?
The governor's wisely putting together a sequestration impact
team. Plan.
I had actually put a bill in that not only asked for a task force for a sequestration, but also, and I think a bigger one and a more sleeping dangerous one, is the Inouye Cliff. I think when all of the things are added up, the sequestration may not even equal what Dan Inouye has done. My alma mater, my East-West Center, it's right now 50% underfunded. So, Mike, it's a very serious thing.
I remember either last year or the previous year to that, you and I were talking about the same thing, because it was one of the many things that was on the chopping block. And
without Dan Inouye.
And wisdom worked through, and Uncle Dan went to bat again. And showed his constituents, it showed his peers, this East-West Center here in Hawaii is pretty important.
And
because
without him...
Gene, you're the one. You spend a lot of time in the Peace Corps and other places. Isn't it true that the East-West Center is sometimes the only time that people from some of these warring factions are courteous to one another?
In fact, instead of Dennis Rodman, they would have Charles Morrison from the East-West Center. He and other of his researchers, I'm sure, either have been there or have had access to the North Koreans. I know particularly the coal expert who knows that there's a lot of resources in North Korea. But the point is that well-kept secret in America is very popular. It's one of the highest regarded institutions in Asia, and it's got a lot of how would you say, goodwill that has never been cashed in to substantive actual dollars from the Congress. And without Inouye, it's not going to come, Mike, and that's very, very unfortunate.
Now, every bird in the nest wants to play the same song. Oh, yeah, but I'm important. This is the difficulty that legislators, that the House and the Senate and the administration has got to sift through. In the next couple of days, it's very important.
Well, my sense is there's a lot of fear-mongering going on, and probably it's much ado about nothing in the ultimate end of it. The fact is we have this huge debt, and we're just going to kick it down down the street.
And they're trying at county level, and they're certainly trying at level. And Gene Ward and I have specific bills that we're going to talk about. But you are important. Let's go talk to Phil on the leaky with a question from Rep. Ward. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, Phil.
Good morning. I just had one of those kind of crazy ideas listening to you talk about the lack of research on a lot of these proposals we have.
Gut rather than mind reactions.
Yeah.
Right, and I just kind of was thinking about, also with the financial situation of, needing to cut various things. But, I know UH is something that we support a great deal, and I'm wondering if we can kind of change that model a little bit and charge them to specifically research this stuff for us.
That's really interesting you mentioned that. As a freshman, I had a bill that said applied research should be a section within every department that has a liaison with a legislative committee that is associated with them, and they should have the legislators sending research to these people to get some data on it. The bill didn't go anywhere, but thank you for reminding me. I'm going to put it back in because that is so real. We have the university researching on stuff that has sometimes meaninglessness. Having gotten a PhD there, I can admit some of the stuff that I did was not useful, but it was where you had to go through the processes and the subculture of academia. But I really appreciate your comment on that because that is so true. We have a lot of bright minds up there that are not putting themselves to actual needed applied research.
Just think of the benefit that we could have by some of these folks up there in academia auditing themselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, checking their own efficiency would be nice.
Yep. Yeah, very good thought. And that's, isn't it true, Gene, that a number of good things come from a constituent that just says, hey, wait a minute, isn't this a way? How many times have you, parsed out a piece of legislation based on an input from a voter?
Case in point, cell phone park at the airport.
Yep.
A constituent came back from the mainland, this is a number of years ago, had parked in a cell phone park in order to get a family member to pick her up. And it was like, hey, why aren't we doing this in Hawaii? I made some calls to DOT, wrote a letter, and boom, without even legislation, we got the cell phone. I think there's 2 of them now.
Yeah, and isn't it also true that the first thing a smart person does is look around other places where stuff works and say, how can we take this thing that's working in New Jersey and make it work in Hawaii?
That was the genius of Charles Dejoux.
Yeah.
And his office manager was my office manager. And I said, how does Charles come up with all these good ideas? Well, we go to comparable sizes
Find out
and
what's
states.
working. Yeah.
Who's doing what? Why reinvent the wheel when there's already so many out there that are doing that? And that's what, hopefully, Mike, all this social media is going to do. It's going to make creative, innovative, hopefully entrepreneurial ideas more accessible to people who have the wherewithal to do something about it.
People can tweet you in the middle of the speech and say, that's not exactly accurate. This is the accurate part, right? Okay, we got more coming up. Representative Gene Ward is in the House.
Happy days are here again. The skies above are clear.
Yeah, we're going to put a chicken in every pot. We're going to put some Kahlua pig on every table. That's what's happening. Happy days. Thursday's the happy day. When all the work that's gone on in the House and the Senate, they just take this big bucket of stuff and they go pour it on the other guy. Stay here. Deal with it. Okay, so we're going to talk about some specific pieces of legislation in this segment and give you the opportunity to participate, particularly if you've got a pet project or a bill or a concern that needs help moving along. 296-KHNR is the number. Representative Gene Ward is in the House, and we're talking story. And, maybe a quick explanation on we actually have 3 bodies of government. Here in Hawaii. We've got the House, we've got the Senate, we've got the administration. It seems like a great set of checks and balances. Some states have a combined legislature where they have, just one group of people.
There's one unicameral legislature.
Yeah. And that was talked about in the past for budgetary reasons and everything else. Maybe we ought to do this. What is the benefit of having a House and a Senate and an administration all looking at the same stuff?
I think the key words were the ones that you used, checks and balances. The House generally is more populist-oriented, and the Senate is a bit more deliberative. They have 4 years. We have 2 years. We have to react quickly with
and there are
public response.
Fewer of them.
They are half our size. We are 51. They are 25. And I think without a Senate, you have probably too much of mob rule, if I can. That's a bit of a crude term probably, but it's where there's a check and a balance. And actually, there's 8 bites of the apple before a piece of information becomes legislation. We got 3 bites in the House, 3 in the Senate. Then we have a conference committee, which is 7, and then the governor weighs in for 8. And any of those 8 bites can knock something out of the ballpark.
I've always looked at that as being sort of a filtration system. You take an idea and you filter all of the bad stuff out of it, hopefully. And at the end of the road, you get everything that we all agree on, maybe a bunch of compromises, but something that is good for all of us. Now, there's a lot of people that say, why do you keep doing this year after year after year, hundreds and hundreds of bills? We have enough laws. We forget some that we've already got.
Well, Mike, now in the coalition, I've paid a little bit more attention to all these, here we get 2,000, 3,000 bills. Well, this is a waste of time, et cetera. But what I've learned, though, is that some, even though it's parceled out to the committees in first reading, the actual number of bills that get heard by the committee chairs, now this is a big variable. Now, I'm a vice chair of the Economic Development and Business Committee. Some committees only hear 20% of the bills that are referred to them. Others hold maybe 70%.
Yeah.
So probably in the middle is 45 to 50%. So there's never 3,000 bills. There's never 2,000 bills. It's always in the hundreds, maybe 1,500 at the most.
Mm-hmm.
And those that get heard don't always pass. So ultimately, at the end of the session, there's maybe 200 bills that actually become law.
Okay, well, the House, your House of Representatives, 36 bills came from the Senate so far over to the House. And the House has so far, sent 140 of them to the Senate. And you guys are voting on 200 this week.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know some of them are important to you, and because you take the time to come down in and visit with us, we'd like to give you the time on parsing out some of these important things and why people ought to know about them. What are some of the Gene Ward pet peeves and pet projects?
Well, let me start with the PLDC, because that's the one I believe that...
are you happy that they're going away?
The big one, the mothership, has sunk.
Yeah.
At least I don't think that's one that's even revivable. But there is a PLDC harbors, which in effect says if it's harbors land, we can almost do the same thing with the PLDC. Mm-hmm. The Senate has a kind of a public-private partnership authority that is kind of going to be a nerve center for a PLDC future. And then the one that most fearful, because of the school across the street from your house, Mike, is the PLDC DOE. If a school is underperforming, and this is my paranoid view of it, they can say that that's one of the places where we can use it for
some of the land.
We can put workforce housing there. We can put a condo there, and we can generate money for the DOE. And
some people say that the reason we're looking at that school because it's probably going to go away. It's just failing. The population is growing in that area. No more little kids. We don't need the school.
That happened to Cocoa Head Elementary even when it was blue ribbon, but the community rose up. We all waved on the highway. We wrote letters. We complained. And it succeeded in staying open. But Pu'uhali, which is just down the street from here,
Gone.
in Kalihi,
Gone.
No, they had the same problem, and they fought back. But it's one of those that had a beautiful semi-industrial location where they could have done a lot of stuff to make money on it. And the fear is that once they start doing this, whether they do it correctly is probably questionable.
Are there some good things in this? In other words, can it be parsed out to the fact that, short-term use of this or short-term use of that, or should we just say no to the whole thing?
I would say let's take some breath, take some time out, take a deep breath, and wait for PLDC to percolate maybe for another session, but not this session. I don't think any of those are worthwhile.
Okay.
The other one, Mike, is the early learning. There was $80 billion spent on Head Start. The data is in on Head Start efficacy. It did not do what it was intended to do. Let's face it, there are a lot of dysfunctional families, there's a lot of disadvantaged families that need help to
sounds good, doesn't it?
To get their kids.
Great.
And who's going to be against early education?
Exactly.
The earlier you teach a kid something, the better he or she is going to be in the future. The difficulty is, and Sam Sloan is probably a little bit more cynical than I am, he calls it a babysitting program. Basically, they're going to have private sector people babysitting these kids at 3.5, 4.5 years old, and the learning process is going to be secondary to basically just maintaining them for the sake of their parents. Obviously, the parents, as all the data indicates, is the biggest variable in student achievement. If parents aren't involved, students are nowhere going to achieve anything unless their parents are giving them a push. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest variable. Then it's teachers, then it's the school environment, then it's the physical safety of the school. So the fact that we have early learning, no one can speak against it, but here's my condition to have it passed. All of the things that we didn't do correctly in the Head Start program, we have to make sure we do correctly in this new early learning program.
And of course, that information is readily available. I mean, you can take a look at statistically what worked and what didn't.
And the best way to make sure that we do that is to do a pilot, not a statewide program, but a very narrow pilot in areas where there would be the need to show that we can take disadvantaged families and we can give them good academic.
Hasn't that worked
grounding.
in with a great deal of success in the past? Pilot programs.
We don't generally do pilot programs. We kind of take it and we make it statewide,
but
and
you
then we
notice
say,
how
"Hey, we screwed up. We got to stop it."
Yeah, but look, Gina, how the private sector does that all the time. Look how a restaurant will say, "Well, we're gonna try this in 15 of our 40 places. If it works, we'll go everywhere."
McRib, case in point.
there you
They're
go.
going to see if it works, and if it doesn't work, hey, take it off. We're going to put kimchi in some of our salads. If it works, and somehow government is not in that mindset, and that's a difficult proposition.
Okay, so right now we say, take the whole thing about schools off the table, come back and look at it down the road, the PLDC thing. But you said there's two places where the PLDC is still alive and well. One is in the schools, the other is in the harbors.
Harbors, exactly. So people need to pay attention to that. If they're PLDC mindful, those are two things that they need to watch.
Well, look at the harbor that we're looking at, the cash register. Look at the Alawai harbor. And look at the concern is, how do you have a multi-purpose building that's creating a boat maintenance place and having weddings upstairs? How in the heck are they going to do that? You know?
You're a sailor, Mike. Maybe you know better than I on that.
I mean,
one.
it's a laughing stock of the harbor. It really is.
That is one of those things that there's never been a consensus on what to do with the Alawai Harbor. I know there's a lot of animosity between DLNR and the residents there and the people who are trying to make changes, those who are kind of fed up with the costs of the slips and how long it takes to get one. But it's still a conundrum.
You know, I really appreciate the position that William Isla's in there, because as a boater and a long-time user of that harbor, the harbor was there a long time before some of these new residents were there. So, you know, there is a harbor and harbor-based activities, you know, activities that happen around a harbor pretty good. And remember, there are some incentives. If you're going to do a business around here that's marine related, we're going to help you out. We're going to give you some tax incentives. Come in here and spend some money.
Speaking of tax incentives, there's a big incentive coming down the line again, Mike, for you to shop online. And I know everybody shops online. There's another internet sales tax, which they call, it's more of a streamline. It comes up every year and it gets knocked down because of the
how in the heck
Constitution.
is that going to work anyway?
Well, the implementation of it.
Yeah,
and this time the DOTAX, the Department of Taxation, is even against it, saying, hey, we got the privilege of giving GD tax licenses and we can police on that basis. But they're still trying to get a huge grab on those internet sales, which maybe in the long run there may be voluntary compliance by some, but I'm not sure if that's.
I can hardly say that would be true to a purchaser. I mean, if I'm searching online to get myself a deal and I find one, that's my deal. I'm not going to say, hey, by the way, I just saved $400 buying my TV online, and I feel bad. Here's $20 for the state.
Well, there was a bill last year that company that you bought it from was going to have to report you to the Department of Taxation, which
and they said no problem, we just won't do Hawaii.
Which was Big Brother coming down on you. Another one, Mike, and this is a controversial one: the 10-cent fee for bags. You go into the place, and if you want a plastic bag, you're going to have to pay 10 cents. That one is coming back and forth, back and forth. It's a good use for what it's intended to do, but in effect, is it going to pass? Well, maybe, but it's up to the counties, and most of all the counties have actually already put one of those bills in.
Okay, so how do we, so in other words, we don't like that?
I have serious reservations about the efficacy of it.
Okay. By the way, weren't there going to be some places that were going to be omitted from that? In other words, convenience stores and some others that wouldn't have to do that?
And if you buy meat or
that
unpackaged
yabbit.
vegetables,
I call that yabbit.
There's
a
yabbit
clause.
There's a lot of yabbits,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of yabbits. Another silly bill is
Okay, hold your thought on that one. Gene Ward is in the house. We got some silly bills and we got some important ones. And more importantly, Gene's going to tell you, and so will I remind you, how you can react on these things. Don't just roll your eyes and think, oh, well, because this is the time of the year where your oh, well can really, really, really make a difference. And I know you may be tired of hearing that, but it really is true. More coming up right after a short little break at 7:47.
To talk to Mike or his guests, call now at 296-KHNR. That's 296-5467. Now, here's Mike on AM 690 KHNR.
Yeah, I know playing that music makes you think I got Dennis Rodman as a guest, but no, I don't. It's me and Gene Ward. Gene Ward and I, over the past legislative sessions, have been together so many times. I really have missed you, although I want to tell you that I appreciate the opportunity to get to know Aaron Johanson. I think he's an up-and-comer in the party.
Man.
And I think that, it was very, very nice of you to suggest, and I know that you did this, that, hey, you know what, we need to shake things up, and we need to get some young energy in here, and I'm glad to know that you're still there and still keeping an eye on things.
Mike, we're only 7.
Yep.
We're still a mighty 7, a magnificent 7,
Yep.
but 4 of us are under 33 years old.
I think that's
So
very
that's
important.
cool. That's
Yep,
the new
yep,
face.
yep. In other words, Twitter, tweeting, Facebook, and all that stuff.
Hey, you got it.
Okay, now, before it gets too late for people to realize, whoops, I should have said something, let's talk about some more of these bills. We only have a few minutes left.
Okay, minimum wage is coming up to, if the governor has it, it'll be up to $9 and attached to the CPI, the consumer.
Let me give you one little thing. The day that story came out, and as you know, our audience is comprised of a lot of small business owners.
Yes, so
and
they
people
should be
working in
heads
small
up.
businesses, and they immediately react. Everybody said, yeah, it looks great. It's a great promise to those that are getting the entitlement. But in actual fact, I'm going to have to cut down staff, cut down hours, and postpone expansion because my business can't take an increase.
And that's going to hurt the young people who are generally the ones who are in that
First
group.
timers.
And they are the ones that comprise there's 15,000, Mike, and there's 1.7% of the labor force that have minimum wage. UH itself says there's going to be no economic impact by this.
Why does it look good? Why does it keep coming up?
Again, it's like, are you going to be against early learning?
No, of course
I mean,
not.
It's
What
like,
are you, anti-education? Do
you still beat your wife? I mean, it's like one of those.
What are you, some kind of American?
It's one of those that you just have to go on the side of, but, and then if you're against it, this is where the political correctness is really skewed, I think, the ideology of what the early rugged Americanism. But anyways, that's a bit of an aside to what otherwise is another silly bill coming up. No feeding of feral birds.
Yeah, now, that one you can lump in together with the cats and the dogs. And what in the world are we wasting time on that for?
I guess there's some homing pigeons that are in some representatives' neighborhood that are coming and making their doo-doo all
Making
over the
messes
place.
on
But,
windshields
I mean, we
and on
should
car
not be
roads.
legislating that at the state level. That's a county issue. That's
Sure.
a home rule issue. It's something we shouldn't be out of. One of the other areas.
In other words, throw the bum out. I mean the bill.
Oh, okay.
Throw the bill.
I won't tell you the author of it.
No, I didn't even want to know.
The people should let the governor know about the Abercrombie Botanical Garden on the 5th floor. There's a proposal to put a garden up there.
Yep.
Whether the roof is strong enough or whether we do air and water only, that's something for people to weigh in. That's.
I mean, it looks good. Some of these things look great. Oh, yeah, this is a great example. We'll be able to, right down there at the big square building, show everybody what they ought to do with their place. Grow food.
And that's kind of like the statement that they're trying to make, and that's probably the only value of it. Mike, the soda tax is likely dead. The House pushed it through. The Senate says a not now, not again, and I think that's probably not going to be alive as it goes through. There's a new bill that says if you're a landlord and you allow pets, you can increase your rent deposit for your renters. I think that's a bad idea.
For pet what? For pet cleanup?
I mean, you already put the rate for the pet.
You've already put it up.
Privilege.
Understanding that you're
So
going to have
you've
to
already
clean the
put it up.
carpets
So
or
why
whatever, right?
we're legislating that? I have a real problem with the logic of it.
You know why we love our pets? Who doesn't love their? Oh yeah, what the heck? I'm for that. I love Fluffy.
But do you want to?
No, of course not.
Okay, that's where the logic of it is. The collective bargaining. This is a sleeper, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the Inouye Cliff. We talk about sequestration. A sleeper is going to be when this thing comes to bear. The most favored nation standard means if your union's got a better deal than mine, I'm going to take yours.
I want your deal.
And I have the right to do that. There's multiple millions of dollars that are unaccounted in our budget right now, even though Abercrombie's suggested almost $500 million extra spending in this budget cycle, $500 million.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't include
instead of cutting spending, we're
collective
increasing.
bargaining.
There's some of this I don't get,
which could be $50 million and above. It doesn't include sequestration. It doesn't include the Noy Cliff. So we're kind of like on this romantic honeymoon where, hey, the economy is upticking, which it is, but in terms of where it is in the long run, I think we have to really hunker down and be fiscally conservative, holding on to their wallets.
You know, you mentioned a couple of times, you said the Inouye Cliff. I don't think people really understand how important Dan Inouye was. You and Dan go way, way back. Dan brought an awful lot of dollars to here that are not necessarily automatically going to keep coming.
And people will know what the pipeline is like when it gets empty, and it's emptying very, very fast. As I said earlier, my alma
There are
mater,
people
the East
waiting
West
for
Center,
that money, right?
is 50% empty right now, and other people are going to say, well, look, I had this before from the U.S. government. Can you now, the state, fund us? And we're not going to have that fund.
Okay, so in other words, watch out.
And those are the things coming up, which when the votes are tallied tomorrow, we'll see how many of these bills still stay alive. But a lot of the bad ones, Mike, are off the table. The GT tax increase, the TAT tax, even though we're probably going to lock it in at 9.25. We promised you, well, look, we're only going to do it for 2 or 3 years. And now we're coming back and locking it in.
Okay, let's go back to the telephones. Let's go out to Kapolei. Everybody's checking in. By the way, tons of email, but we like I've told you earlier in the hour, we don't respond to email when we got the live politicals in the house, so that we don't get charged of stacking the deck. Mike joins us next from Kapolei. Hi, Mike.
Hey, how you do? The both of you doing this morning?
Good morning, Mike.
My question is dealing with Governor Abercrombie's view on solar power and everything, and the tax credits.
Yes. Do you want an opinion on that?
Yes, I'd like to know how long they're going to last.
What seems to be afoot? The Abercrombie administration has actually cut them in half by rulemaking, and the legislature is in the process of doing the same by statute, and sometimes even worse than what the administration is doing. I personally have taken the opposite view. In terms of PV, it's an industry that's not even an infant yet. It's a zygote. It's like less than 1% of the electricity running through our system is PV. Even though there's been a boost in it, it's going to cost us some money to get off that $6 billion of fossil fuel. Case in point, we've tried to incentivize just solar water heating for the last 30 years. We got less than 30% of the houses with solar water. If we're serious about using our natural sun and our energy to become the nation or the world leader, we've got to subsidize this thing a bit longer. So right now, people who are intending to do their solar, if they haven't done it by the end of last year, they're going to be shortchanged by the end of this year, because that's when the solar is going to kick out. Right now, it's still good for 2013, but come next year, it's going to be cut down from 35, I think, to 25, and 2015 down to 10. And as Marxist says, the withering away of the state, the withering away of any solar subsidies, which I believe personally is not good policy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there you go, Mike. And by the way, isn't that because we are going to run out of time, and of course, immediately we say that, the phones all light up, Gene. Before we go, isn't that a real big one? Because aren't there some people taking advantage of some of the credits? If they could clean up maybe some of the solar credits, would they last longer?
Some are gaming the system, Mike. There's no question about
gaming
that.
the system. That's a good one.
You know, anytime a lawyer is involved and knows how to get around something, they will do it, and they are doing it. But we have such a poor data collection system. They don't know who's doing it, how many are doing it, and this is why I talked about the cheap anecdotal stuff that we get. We don't get solid data on numbers from either the Department of Taxation or from the Energy Division in the Department of Business and Economic Development.
So you want to point people at Olelo? It's important. You can see some of this stuff.
Tune in tomorrow.
Tune in tomorrow.
Have a look at it.
Yeah, and that's going to be very important. Gene Ward from the House of Representatives joining us live. Today, everybody is taking a look at stuff. Tomorrow, the big vote is in, so today would be the day to get in touch by email or by phone or by homing pigeon to your legislator, right?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah. Tell your viewers and your listeners to hang on to their wallets until it's over tomorrow. Yeah, see, he says viewers because he doesn't realize how nice he looks on radio. We'll be right back right after the news. I'm Mike Buck on Monday Morning.